spoke with a journalist probably 20 minutes before we got on this phone call, and it was only about 2 hours ago that the US had notified its citizens and visa holders that evacuation flights had ended. And so I passed on that message because the people that I'm speaking with are desperate to get out. They are so fearful of what life looks like for them under the Taliban, but also ISIS. And the response that this journalist gave me was, I'm speechless. My life has ended. It's over. And that pretty much summed it up in terms of what people are telling me in Kabul. But I think that we need to understand that most of the people that are in Kabul, particularly at the moment, are ones that have fled there to get out of the country, knowing that it was the location that was going to be their only chance to get on an evacuation flight. Because what's happened in the last 10 to 14 days for a lot of people, including myself, has felt like everything has played out in slow motion. What people within the defense community and the Afghan community and those that wanted safety and a prosperous future, they predicted the fall of Kabul and the Taliban taking over and what that would mean for them. So what has happened in the last days for a lot of people is no real surprise. That doesn't take away the devastation. If anything, it adds to it, because there has been this huge amount of predictability to what we've seen play out in essentially slow time.
Do you see a different Taliban or just a different method to get to the same point?
I think I do see different Taliban from different in my opinion, they are this time more powerful, and they have adopted the new way of propaganda and technology. So they are embracing that. So in the past, as you mentioned, so they were against anything like a graffiti, a photo or things. It's still like they are against those things, but they have been utilizing the tools and the technology themselves for their own promotions and to kind of portray a good image of them to the world in order to get legitimacy. So though they have already got enough legitimacy that they did not have back in the 1990s and early 2000s. So I think they have changed in that way, like kind of gaining more, like embracing those opportunities to work them out in their own benefits. But in their ideology, I don't think they have changed very much, because what they do is like, I think Taliban is an ideology, and their ideology is the extremism. So if they give up on those extremist ideology, then they will collapse. So that is why, like, they have been emphasizing on the caliphate system or emirate system in Afghanistan. So they do not accept democracy. They do not accept, if you talk about human rights or women.
To the largest tribe. You can also, Kate, use the C word corruption or the P word Pakistan. But I want to know why you think it was that the Taliban could sweep to power in this way.
Well, I think it's absolutely all of the above, but you have to consider as well, after 20 years under a coalition-led, I'm loath to say recovery because it certainly wasn't, Afghanistan is not in a better place. Its economy has not grown. The security of people is not better. And in a sense, we have tried to place Western ideals on a country that is rooted in tribalism. And I would argue that any country going through a reform needs to have the people of the country at the center of its reform. But the way that particularly in the rebuilding phase, has been, as you said, corruption, It's a country that is complex, and it has, we say, you know, in the Western world, it's the war on terror or it's the war on drugs, but those words in a place like Afghanistan are day-to-day life. So you do have warlords that control areas, and you have Taliban or people that actually can, in some cases, provide governance that people are looking for. And certainly soldiers that I've spoken to, particularly special forces operators, they said that the Taliban in some areas, they provided this sense of normality that the Western world just could not provide with any assurity or security because of the layers of corruption that this war has been built on, with so much of it being privatized. We've had mercenaries that have been at the center of so much of it. We've had a fake economy that has been driven by money just being injected by the US and ghost soldiers and so many different elements that we cannot simplify what has happened in Afghanistan to get to this point where we are today. But that doesn't mean that the point where we are today is by any means acceptable. I think there was going to be a point where NATO forces withdrew and the Taliban were going to come into power. But the way that they have done that has been deeply concerning on so many levels, because we've had reports come out of Afghanistan for months now that the Afghan National Army, who were relied upon to be the one thing that would slow down the Taliban to get to Kabul and essentially come into rule, there's been reports for months that these soldiers weren't fed, they weren't paid. And that's not a new thing to happen to the ANA in itself. That's happened for years in different parts. But when you put a force under so much pressure at a time where they are up against an enemy that they've never fought at that speed or power or strength before, because the Taliban also recruited as they went through. They made deals with warlords, and they struck these agreements that provinces realized, well, if we can't fight them, we might have to join them.
For you, Batoor, from someone who's listening in from Karon, what are you hearing about what's currently happening to the Hazaras who are in Afghanistan, Batoor?
What is happening is, so we have mixed of informations and fears and concerns from within the community, especially the Hazaras from different parts of Afghanistan. There is overall a great fear and concerns that the behavior of Taliban will change dramatically after once the Americans pull out. And also at the same time, like they have been, since they took control of the Kabul, like they started searching the houses and like those who have been affiliated with the government and the NGOs, and also they were part of the military and journalists and some other politicians. So there is this particular, like I have a friend who was at the Ministry of Interior, so he has been posting on his Twitter that Taliban has been searching for him, and they tortured his assistants and like now looking for his whereabouts. So they have announced this amnesty for everyone who have worked with the government or coalition forces, but not for Hazaras. Probably that is a different story for the people. So yesterday there was this video circulating, was viral, of a Taliban man who is giving warnings to the Hazaras that once we are just waiting for the orders of our leader. Once we get a green light, then we will just kill every Hazara, every Shia. and we will not spare them. And there has been argument that this video belongs to some time old. It is not new. But what I say is, this is not the problem, like the issue of when it was published or when it was recorded. What Hazaras are facing is like the mindset. This mindset has been there for over a century. We have been subject to genocide and persecuted for a very long time. No matter if there were kings, if there were like democratic governments like Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, or like the Taliban. So we have been subject to persecution and genocide. So we are against that mindset that exists there. Doesn't matter like when that video was published. So that exists, and the Taliban are like really not acceptable of the